We've looked at quite a few topics in Unix/Linux, and we have even seen how to do shell scripts, and so we're pretty much at the end of learning about Unix. So these are just a few cleanup commands and things and topics. The chapter is chapter 14 from Unix Unbounded by Amir Afzal. And the title is Farewell to Unix, but we're not really going to say goodbye to Unix. We're going to keep using it for the rest of the semester. But we're sort of saying farewell to learning new commands. From now on, we'll just keep using commands that we've seen before, pretty much. Okay, so we've covered the Unix basics, and you know about shell programming. And the commands in this chapter include disk commands, file manipulation commands. Some of these you've seen. The one spelling command, that's not that important, but it's a nice thing to know. So you've already learned quite a few file manipulation commands, and the new commands in this chapter will supplement what you already know. Okay, and then I'll have another set of lectures. It'll be lecture set 14, which will stay on this chapter and conclude with some security and system administration commands, and also remote logging in type commands. Okay, so the first set of commands, or there's a couple of them, df and du, we'll look at disk space. So disk space limit depends on two things: the total amount of storage space available and the total space set aside for inodes. And we've seen what inodes are. We know that inodes are basically how you represent files and directories. The quickest way to find the available disk space is the df command, which stands for disk free. It's used to find the total amount of disk space, or the space available on a specified file system. So for example, this is how you would use it normally. If you have a whole bunch, you normally have a whole bunch of file systems set up on a given system, and you say df, you don't specify a name, and you get a list of all of the file systems. So let's try that real quick. So if you say df, I get a whole bunch of them. There's really only one real disk, but the rest of it is all stuff that are sort of pretend and look like this. So this is on a live CD. This is what you would see. So for example, /dev/sr0 is a CD-ROM. /dev/loop0, I believe, is the same thing, just judging from the sizes. Then there's a temp file system. There is the /cow, which is really just memory. On a live DVD, things are a little bit different from what I would say a normal system, because on a live DVD, we make RAM look like a file system. So things are a little bit different from what you would see on a quote-unquote normal system. On a normal system, you would see something like this with an inode count and things like that. Let me see. I didn't really look. Yeah, I guess we don't really see inode count by default. Let's take a look at the man page, some of the options. -I will give us inode information. So I hit Q. df -I. Okay. So try that command out. What you will see on a normal system is, let's say you have two file systems. Of course, we have a rather different system since we have a live DVD. Okay, so one thing to note is that the Unix system usually uses a 512 byte block for disks or things that look like disks. However, for Linux, the default right now as far as I know, is 1024. So the book talks about 512 byte blocks. We will see, I believe, mainly 1024 byte blocks. Okay, so minus t will give you the total number of blocks. Let's see if that works for us. I don't know if this will. Yeah, it doesn't work for us. I think we need an argument saying which file system we're looking at. Yeah, I don't think I'll be able to get this to work on this system. Try this. No. So there are a few things that don't quite work the way it's explained here in the book, unfortunately. So df is one command that usually tells you how much free disk space you have. Usually works on a good system, on a normal system, rather than a live DVD like the one that we have. du is probably a little bit more helpful. So du stands for disk usage. It's used to obtain some output that says for each directory in the file system the number of blocks or the part of it that's used and how much, and so from that you can calculate how much space is empty. It doesn't tell you how much free space you have, it just tells you how much is in use. And usually, let me just, before I go through the commands, usually what I do is if I'm in my home directory, I almost always use this with these options: summary and kilobytes for the report. And so this gives me a very brief summary. It says I'm using 78,000 kilobytes, that's 78 megabytes in my current working directory. So this is what I use on real systems where I have to figure out if I'm using up too much space or not. Okay, so that said, let's take a look at more details of this command. So let's say you have this file system. We have the root /user/David, and then inside /user/David, two directories, one called source, one called memos. The source has a couple of, I think, directories. So yeah, so memos and source, although they're drawn differently, I believe there's meant to be, wait, these two are directories, and I believe these two are too. So disk usage by default tells you the number of blocks and that's being used by each one of these subdirectories. So let's try that. du, and there's way too many directories here, unfortunately, so I get a big lot of, it's many pages of output. And this is one of those cases where you can say du and pipe it to more or less, and you can go through. A lot of these are pretty small, empty, and pretty much empty. So once again, keep in mind these blocks are, I believe, 1 kilobyte blocks. You can check that by saying du minus s and du minus sk. They give you the same number, meaning that even when you ask for kilobyte blocks, it gives you the same number, so therefore this was also kilobytes. Okay. So in this example, /memos takes 4 512 byte blocks in this case, apparently, assuming that's a standard Unix system. But if we were using it on Linux, this would be a 4K byte block. There's a bunch of options that you can try. You can say -a. I think by default we actually get all of them. So in Linux, I don't believe you'll get anything different by saying du minus a, because it, oh, and without the -a, well, yeah, it is different. So I guess du minus a will give you more information even on the system we are using. You seldom have to use byte sizes because usually sizes are so large that if you use -b, you'll get way too much information, as if this is not enough. du -b, and yeah, so this tells me I have 75 megabytes. And you can try it out and figure out if I didn't use du -b, it does look like it's more. This is the same amount. And how does that work? I believe you have to. That is a good. Not sure exactly why this. I was expecting this to actually be smaller than 75,000. So we'll have to look into that. So usually I use summarize and K for kilobytes. We might want to, maybe to understand the difference, let's take a quick look at the man page for du. Oops. Man du. So note, if you use mega -bm, this is not 1 million, but 1024 times 1024, which is what I was expecting. And so I'm a little bit puzzled by the difference. There's probably a good explanation that I'm just not seeing right now. So if this, let's try du -bm. Oops. Yes. -s -bm, 77 megabytes. All right. So we know that from the documentation that this is 77 times not 1 million, but 77 times this number. So some of it I believe makes sense. Okay, let's move on. So you can look in bytes, you can have du output byte counts. -s is what I typically use, and I typically do not use bytes just because it gives you typically gives you very large numbers. Okay, so a pretty straightforward command. Du. Maybe talk very quickly about a couple more commands. Man is something that we've used, I hope, quite a bit. And you can even do man to, if you haven't seen this, I'm hoping you have. You can see, for example, the different sections of the man pages. I'm going to go back. And a couple of other things. There is no banner command, and it's something that I've used way in the distant past. But if you try to execute the banner command that the book talks about, you'll get a message saying you can actually install the Csis 5. This is System 5 banner command. Maybe some people still use it, but I certainly haven't used it for many years. So we're not going to worry about the banner command. But man, of course, everyone should know. Okay, so next up we'll look at the at command.